Who were you before you lost your wild self?
That's what we're helping you explore on the Tend Her Wild podcast.
Through questions and tools around how best to listen to your inner voice,
rewild ourselves, and live the most authentic life where we thrive instead of survive.
I'm Betsy.
And I'm Kate.
And we're so glad you've joined us for this episode. Hello, Tend Her Wild podcast listeners. Kate and I are here today with a very special guest. And this is the first time we have a guest that is like, I'm not going to give you a bio because that was the person who I was and I'm transforming into something different. And so it would be a past version of me. And we were both like, yes. So we are thrilled to have a conversation today with Brenda Crawford. A woman I have known now for 5-6 years, maybe around that time. She's been on a major health journey, and that's going to be a real focus of our conversation today in these last 5 years. And so welcome, Bioless Brenda.
Hi.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Well, you know, Brenda, if you listen, that we always like to start off with that magical question of tell us about your first 10 years so that we can start to get to know just, how you grew up, where you grew up, some of the threads that maybe are still showing up for you and experiences that were formidable. So tell us a little bit about young Brenda.
I would say, I just talked to my mom about this not very long ago. And she said I was a very precocious child. The other thing that she said almost immediately is that I was the exact opposite of my older sister. So very different experiences for her as a parent. She said that I was a pretty easy baby. I didn't cry a lot. And one of the things that I've thought about a lot is I've been very familiar with medicine my entire life.
Oh, wow. Tell us.
So, I had chronic ear infections as an infant, and my parents never knew that I had them until I would run a fever. And so they would take me to the doctor, and the doctor would just be so confused that I wasn't screaming my head off because I had such infected ears. And so my mom said, I mean, in a way, they never knew that I was in pain because I just never complained about anything from birth.
Wow,
And
that's so interesting.
It's really interesting to me because even as a child, I kind of, and I don't think that this was necessarily taught to me, but just something from within. I just never complained about anything really. And so, she just remarked that, even, I mean, I was pretty sick pretty often, and I just wasn't that hard to take care of, I guess. But she said I was challenging in other ways. I started walking at like 9 months, maybe.
You were a mover. You're a mover and a shaker.
And I talked early. I read early. And I remember my grandfather used to remark that we were like these little chickens, my sister and I, that would like run under tables because we were so tiny, and we fit under furniture. So my mom said I was a very happy child. I was a very loving child. And I loved physical affection. I was very huggy. I was just a very loving child.
Mm.
Um, and, I think as I got older, I loved being in the water. I loved swimming. I spent every summer swimming, every single day. And the funny thing is I always told myself that if I was ever going to be diagnosed with a cancer, it would be skin cancer because
Mm.
I was a child of the 80s,
Yes. You were
and
Baby oil,
baby oil and
yeah,
lemon
and
juice in
oil.
the hair. I would always
yeah,
put lemon juice in my
and
hair.
and probably burned every single day because
Mhm.
I'm fair-skinned and freckly and, a little redhead kind of. So, I just I loved my childhood.
Yeah. And you
Mm.
were a musician as a young person as well, and you came from a very musical family. That was a big part of your early experiences. Is that correct?
Correct. My dad is a band director, was,
Yeah.
he's retired. But even from a very young age, we had music playing in our house 24/7, like constantly. And it was always such just a part of the fabric of our family. My mom is very musical. All of my siblings are very musical. And really, I mean, I feel pretty blessed. I was raised by and with very, very intelligent, smart people.
Mhm.
But we're all very heady.
Mm.
And so, when I think about growing up, it just seemed very, how do I say, like typical Midwestern,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know, um, small town. The first 10 years of my life, very small town. Rode my bike every day for
At all
hours on
at all
end.
hours,
Little
yes.
strawberry shortcake watch telling me what time I needed to be home. Um,
We are the
you
same
know,
vintage. I think I
Mhm.
had that same watch.
Yep.
yeah, I just remember it being probably the hardest thing that I remember, or like a traumatic thing that I remember. A tornado went through my town, and a classmate of mine lost their house, and ended up moving away. And when you grow up in in a class of 25 kids, it's kind of a
Yep.
big
Yeah.
loss when that happens. And so I think I was 5 or 6 when that happened. And the other thing that I remember, a classmate of mine, probably right around when I was 10 or 11 years old, died in a farm accident.
Mm.
So I think the first funeral that I attended was for a child,
A classmate.
a
Mm.
Mm.
classmate. But beyond that, I feel, I feel like my childhood was fairly uneventful.
Yeah.
But going back to what I said about my familiarity with the medical community,
Yeah.
I was hospitalized when I was 6. I was in first grade with some unknown illness. I was in the hospital for, I think, close to 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And this was soon after my younger brother was born. So he was an infant. And because he was an infant, my parents really couldn't come visit me because
Mm.
they didn't know what was going on with me and they didn't want to
Bring it home.
take it home to my brother.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I remember at a very young age, I think of these like dark nights of the soul kind of thing. And I know that we may chat about that
Yeah.
actually here in a little bit, but um, I remember I was alone in a
Mm.
hospital,
Yeah.
kind of isolated because they didn't know what was wrong with me for what felt like months. It felt like
Sure.
such
Yeah,
a very
Two
long time.
weeks for a little kid is a long
it
time.
is.
And, and I just all of the testing, and I don't think that they ever figured out what was wrong with me. I just know that I was very, very, very sick.
Yeah.
And I missed the majority of the second half of first grade, at least a month. I was out of school for at least a month.
Wow.
Really?
Um,
Good.
and and I broke my collarbone twice that year as well. So
Wow.
6 was a tough year.
six was a very tough year.
Yeah.
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 But there definitely are threads, and we'll definitely
Mm.
circle back around to this. What strikes me so much, Brenda, is that you didn't complain, that there was, even as a
Mm.
baby with those earaches, you were very quiet and still in the midst of all of this physical health stuff. And that's definitely a through line to
Mhm.
what you've been through in these last 5 years. So take us forward to this next phase of life because you went off, I believe, to Iowa State, correct?
I did.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you went off and got a PhD in counseling psychology.
I did.
Yes. So what drove some of those choices? And I mean, my question, I don't know if this is Kate's question, but like, why psychology? I
Yeah,
always find that fascinating. She was a psych major too,
I
so.
was.
Oh, well, I think music was the other potential route. I was a very successful high school musician. I was a four-year all-stater.
Mm.
Um, and
Euphonium, am I right?
euphonium, yeah.
Really?
So,
I
so
Wow.
remember
my,
that.
well, because I wanted to be a drummer, and my dad decided to test me on all of the instruments, and he decided, and he made a very good choice, but he decided that that was the best instrument for me. And I sometimes always think, most small bands don't have enough low brass, in them. So I
Mhm.
think he was also thinking we don't need another
Trumpet player,
Right.
saxophone,
player
flute.
or a trumpet player. So, and he always told me that he would just teach. He's a percussionist. And so he was like, oh, I can always just teach you that on the side. And
Yeah.
that never happened, but, you know, but I had a lot of encouragement to seek a degree in music. The problem, and I probably had the talent for it, the problem is I didn't have the confidence for it.
Mm.
I felt like a fraud in that part of my life. I still have a very hard time reading music. But I knew the fingerings of everything. So, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to get through music theory and all of these things. And I just didn't have the confidence to do that. I have mixed feelings about that now. Um,
Mm,
but my mom's degree is in anthropology. And so my parents are very giving people. And my mom's work, when she did work outside the home, because she stayed home with us for the majority of that first 10 years, but she worked in supportive residential facilities for individuals that had severe and profound intellectual or physical disabilities. And so I feel like from a very young age, it was always instilled in me the importance of taking care of people.
mm,
Mhm.
She also, taught adults to read who had, challenges, learning challenges. Kind of a fun story. I remember we were at like a community center, and it's where people donated clothes. And so while she would do lessons with these adults, my sister and I would play dress up with all of the donated clothes. So that, I mean, that's a fun memory that I have. But I feel like psychology, unfortunately, was where I landed because I didn't know where else to go.
mm.
I knew that I liked people. I was frequently the person that friends would come to if
Yeah.
they had challenges or difficulties. I remember once in high school, a teacher bringing me into the bathroom to talk to a friend of mine who
Oh,
had kind of
wow.
pulled herself up in there.
Mm.
So even adults in my life were sort of asking me to provide support for people. And it just seemed like something that came easy to me and I enjoyed. I felt good about it. Um, kind of going back to that theme of not complaining, I really enjoyed taking on other people's stuff and helping them with it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, and my mom said, even within like my classes when I was young, I never got in trouble for anything other than finishing my homework and then kind of social butterflying around and seeing if anybody needed
Needed
help.
help.
Yeah.
You're a
Or-
You're a
typical
helper.
helper, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's what I did. And I mean, I was doing that in kindergarten, she
Yeah.
said. So, I mean, that's just part of
It's baked
my
in,
fabric.
baked
Yeah,
into Brenda.
just
Yeah.
Yep.
it's just part of me. So I ended up at Iowa State really because my sister went there. I had applied to 10 schools my senior year, had no idea what I wanted to do. July came around and my parents were like, you need to decide
Yeah.
where you're going.
Me too. It was the same thing. They sat me down. They're like,
Last
today
minute.
is the day you
And
must decide.
yeah, and I had flip-flopped between like three different schools for three different things. I had a time when I thought that I was going to go get like I was going to go to the University of Kansas for meteorology and broadcast journalism because I love the weather and I love
Hmm.
science. And so there was a time that I was going to do that. And I feel like I ended up at Iowa State sort of just because it was a place that I knew and it felt
Familiar.
safe to me. I was really scared, probably more scared than I would admit at the time. I was petrified about going off to college. Um, Another funny story, I didn't get my driver's license at 16. I was past 17. It was in my senior year when I got my driver's license. I was petrified to drive because I thought for sure I would hurt myself or I would hurt somebody else. It just seemed like too much of a
Hmm.
responsibility
Yeah.
for someone to like of my age
Yeah.
to do. And
There's probably truth in
Yeah.
that.
There
If we,
yeah,
probably is.
and I just didn't, I just wasn't sure if I could handle the responsibility of harming someone.
Oh.
And I don't like doing things I'm not good at. And the first time that
feels
I
like
drove,
another theme
Mhm.
too, right? Like,
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
first time I drove with my dad, I popped a tire on our van. And so I was just like, I'm a bad driver and I
Yep.
just shouldn't do that. But not to go off on so many tangents.
So
Um,
but you
Yeah.
pursued psychology and did you do that at Iowa State as well, the PhD at Iowa State?
I did.
Yeah,
Okay.
you stayed in
Not
Ames a long
recommended,
time.
but yeah, I had decided to do a concurrent program where I would get my master's and my bachelor's at the same time. Sounded like a great idea at the time. And had started that program during my senior year, my fourth year at Iowa State, and was in a terrible car accident about 5 days into second semester in the spring, which took me out of school because I was in a coma for a while.
Wow.
It was a
Wow.
Another
very,
medical thing.
yeah,
And the threat of the fear of kind of automobiles and driving, and
yeah.
then to be in
I
an
feel like I
accident
had
years
a
later.
premonition, Kate. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
really do.
It feels like that.
Yes, I feel like there was something in my body that was like, you need to be really careful with this.
Oh, so you were
So
in a coma.
yeah, medically induced
Okay.
for a little while because I had had so much damage. Was in the hospital for a couple weeks, was in a wheelchair for about 4 months.
Wow.
and
Oh,
had to learn to walk again.
My
Um,
goodness.
and then got married that June. So my wedding actually was the first time that I had been on my feet for longer than an hour at a time. Uh,
really?
yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I had started this concurrent program and was super excited about it. But while I was in the hospital, I worked with a psychologist because I had amnesia. I had no recollection of anything probably for probably most of the day of the accident. And obviously for, weeks afterward, I was having a really hard time remembering things. And so working with her changed my plan a little bit.
Okay.
And I had a wonderful, wonderful advisor at Iowa State that just kind of put this little bug in my ear. And she's like, I know it's really hard right now, but maybe you should think about applying to the PhD program. And so I did, and, hadn't taken the GRE, hadn't done anything, but had been a student there, and ended up starting the PhD program that fall.
Wow.
So
That's a lot all at once. If I can just
yeah,
reflect for you, that's a lot to be able to stay in school and continue to excel given everything you just gone through and
and
getting married.
and I got married,
Did you
and
have kids in grad school?
not until the very
Not
end.
until the very end.
So
Okay.
I was pregnant with my son during my final year before going on my internship because we thought that'd be great timing. Um, Not so sure that it was to have, a 3-month-old starting internship.
Yeah.
But actually did my internship at Iowa at the University
Okay.
of Iowa in the counseling center there. So
Okay. Like a little side note. When were you there? What year at the
um,
counseling center?
2000, 2003,
Okay. Okay. So
Or later.
I was, well, no, yeah. I graduated in 2003. So we did overlap probably a
Yeah,
year.
so it would have been like 2003, 2004, or 04, 05. I can't remember
Okay.
which
Yeah. You were
one.
a couple of years after me, I think, but
Can
Yeah.
we back up? I'd love to hear your story of how you met your husband and just a summary of kind of that because that kind of got slid in there, but it feels like that happened in college.
Yes. I actually met him the week before school started, my freshman year. We
Okay.
were both in the marching band at Iowa State. And so I played baritone, marching baritone, and he played tenor sax. And so we tended to be in the same sectionals. He was the most beautiful man I think I had ever seen in
Aw.
your life, but I also was petrified of him because he was the most beautiful man that I had ever seen. So it really, I think there was interest there, but it probably wasn't until we actually formally met at the Halloween party that fall. And we've been pretty much inseparable ever since that. Um,
Mm,
so just, I mean, he, I can't say enough wonderful things about him. I think in all of the time that I have, been dealing with this health issue, he's, I think he's only missed 2 treatments and I've had
mm,
104.
yeah. He's a
So,
good man.
he's
Good man.
just he's such a good human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the time I was coming out of an entire high school length relationship. And so, quite honestly, I probably wasn't in the best place myself to accept him for like where he was at that
Mhm.
point in his life. He's a couple years older than me, and so he had some years to figure things out, and I was just a mess. I
Yeah.
was I was an 18-year-old mess. So
Yeah.
um, we've grown up together.
It's
We
beautiful.
really, really have. So
And you
yeah,
have
he's
these two amazing kids, a
I
son who
do.
also went to Iowa State and is an engineer now. Is that right?
He is an actuary.
An actuary.
Yeah.
And then a daughter who's a musical theater phenomenon who's sang with Kristen Chenoweth, which
She
my
did.
kids are like they always ask me, "What about your friend's daughter who knows Kristen Chenoweth?" Because you know my kids are theater geeks too.
What did she sing with her in?
She was asked to sing with her in Nashville. She sang for Good.
From
That
Wicked, the
Yes.
big
did
song.
with her
Oh,
at the Nashville Symphony and then again at the Grand Ole Opry. So yeah, she got to sing with her twice. And Kristen is just the most lovely, wonderful. I mean, that's kind of another really interesting, funny story in terms of synchronicities. So after I was diagnosed with cancer in January of 2020, this would have been probably close to a year later. I, I was really trying not to get into this doom scroll kind of habit at that time because, it was COVID and I wasn't really allowed to go anywhere. But I happened to be on Twitter one day and this thing just kind of popped up on Twitter, apply to go to Kristen Chenoweth Broadway Boot Camp. And I took a screenshot of it and I sent it to my daughter, who happened to be in school at the time. Sorry. Um, and and I was like, wouldn't this be great? And she, at the time, she was like 14. And I kind of expected her to be like, whatever, mom. But she's like, I'm totally doing this.
my
And
gosh.
so she sent in the audition. They have thousands of kids from all over the world that apply for this every single year. They took 50 kids, and she found out that she got to go. And she's been every year since. They shot a documentary that year with Kenny Ortega, who did Dirty Dancing and all the Descendants movies and all the High School musicals. And she has created a very good relationship with Kristen. We're just very blessed for that. I do think that it has opened doors for her that and it has encouraged her in ways because the parallel that I see my daughter, both of my kids actually very, very musically talented individuals. And I started to see with her, she's also 6'3". And
Blonde, six
so
three, longest legs. I mean, you look at this young woman and you're like, what?
yeah, so I mean, she was getting recruited to play volleyball in college, and so I think she was getting pulled in directions.
Yes.
And I saw her struggling with the same confidence issue that I was, that maybe I should go to college and just play volleyball and get a psych degree and, work like my mom did. And I really do feel like these experiences and the words and encouragement that she got from Kristen, from the other staff, just incredible Broadway performers that she got to train with. I think that they really made her feel like her dreams were not too big. They were not too much. Um, she's not she's sort of the opposite of Kristen, right? Kristen is 4'11", maybe, and here Kenzie is 6'3", and I think she had been told by other adults in her life um, that she just wouldn't ever fit in any of the roles. Like she would never get work because, they would never have, a male counterpart that would be as tall as she was. And she really believed all of that. So the gratitude that I feel for just happening to see this little blurb on Twitter. You know what I mean? That I could have just
Changed
easily
her life.
Yeah.
Really changed Kenzie's
changed
life.
her
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And
Can I just reflect
yeah,
to you like that there's something in that that feels very like mom instinct that you acted on.
I
And
hope so.
yeah, but you I don't know. I just feel like sometimes our children, even our young girls at 14, right? They're already getting put into boxes. And as a mom, you saw that happening. You'd experienced maybe that yourself. And so it's like you threw her almost like this lifeline of like, look at this. Like this is possible. This is,
Yeah.
wouldn't this be amazing? So I just want to reflect. I know these
Yeah.
other people stepped in later, but you were the
You were the
one.
OG,
Oh,
Brenda.
You were.
oh,
Yeah. And now Kenzie's at like the top musical theater school in the country, right?
yeah,
Or one of
she's
the
at the
top. She's at,
University of Michigan,
Mhm.
pursuing a degree in musical theater.
I mean, we're
And
going to see that girl on Broadway. I already know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Her name is going to be in lights.
Yes.
yeah, and
Yeah.
when I think about both of my children, um, they, there have been little things along the way, that I feel like they have taught me, because I really, they're such capable humans. And, Betsy, a long time ago, early on in my studying with you, I remember so vividly, you bringing up this concept of spiritual sovereignty,
Mm.
which, I'm shocked um, that it seemed so novel to me, given that I was a psychologist and I worked in private practice. And, you know, I really, I mean, it wasn't my job to tell people what to do or to give them advice. Um, but boy, did I try to control my kids,
Mm.
boy, did I um, want to have a say
Yeah.
in what they were doing. And they have taught me just to let them figure it out.
Yeah.
Trust them.
They're so capable. Both of them are just so capable. And I've come to realize, I am a helper by nature. I have a very powerful need to be needed. And it's a wonderful thing and a horrible thing at the same
Mm.
time when your kids don't need you.
Yeah.
And, and of course my kids need me just in very kind of unexpected ways
Mhm.
sometimes.
I'm a little in that stage now too, with all three kids grown and out of the house. And I read something recently that we become kind of this bystander that's ready and able to step in when asked, but we really are, we have this ringside seat to their life in a way that's not as, we're not in it in the same way. We're stepped back a few steps, but we're right there. And just them knowing you're right there is like all they need, because at any moment you might be called upon, but we have to wait for that invitation, which as a helper myself is hard.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
and I think about, my son just recently started his first post-grad job, moved into his own place and is just so ready
Yeah.
to not need anything from us. He was home last weekend and he said, it just feels so good to have like everything in my name,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
to, maybe I won't need you guys for anything. And, there's a certain amount of pride that I
Yep.
feel, he's a young adult and is adulting very well. And I'm super proud of him. But at the same time, there's also this like, oh,
A little pang.
Yeah.
my baby's not a baby
Yeah.
anymore. And, he's magnificent
You
and
did good,
brilliant.
Mama.
Yep.
You did good.
Yeah, we really
You
did.
did
And,
good.
and that's not to say that particularly, I mean, their lives, obviously, there have been challenges, and particularly in the last 5 years, a lot of challenges
Yeah.
Hmm.
for
Let's
them.
let's
Let's
go
dive into
I
that.
think that's it because our theme this year is hope. And for months I've been saying to Kate, I really want to get my friend Brenda on and her story. And so you've set this up really well in that you knew the medical system through those early years. You were in a coma, which I didn't know about that one
Yeah.
in college. Then you worked kind of adjacently to the medical system as a psychologist in private practice. And then lead us to the moment where you learned of your diagnosis, because if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it was a shock to you. You didn't see it coming. There weren't a lot of symptoms or a lot of signs. So receiving this information was quite something. So take us to that moment 5.5, 6 years ago.
It was really unexpected. Um, if I think about the fall of 2019, I felt like I was on the top of my game. My kids were 13 and 16, I think, at the time. Um, Very busy kids, but we had gotten into this rhythm with them.
Hmm.
I had a very promising private practice. I was booked and blessed, as they would say. And I loved the work that I did. I was coaching my daughter's volleyball team. I had also kind of taken this different approach for myself in terms of like I was starting to get back into this like my kids are good, I can take some time for myself
Hmm.
and do some things for me. And so like my exercise regimen had changed and I physically felt really good actually. My husband and I had taken a trip to California together. We really hadn't taken that many like solo trips without our kids, and it was lovely and wonderful. And I had had my 25th high school reunion and saw all of my high school friends and was just like things were good. But I had noticed that I had a lump behind my earlobe, my right earlobe. And I had brought it up to a doctor and she wanted me to see a dermatologist. So I went and saw a dermatologist and she was like, oh, I think it's probably just a cyst. If it doesn't go away by Christmas time, maybe go have an ENT check it out. And so it hadn't gone away by Christmas. And, I think hindsight has blinded me a little bit, or at least made things fuzzy in terms of how things were, um, because of what I know now. So trying to remember how everything went is a little bit fuzzy because I really just wasn't paying that much. I was not worried. Like I
Hmm.
wasn't paying that much attention. But when I went to the ENT, he's like, "Yeah, I think that that could be a benign tumor. Nothing to worry about." He's like, "I am going to biopsy it though, but let's plan on taking it out." And so I was reeling honestly from that because the to get to get a parotid tumor out, you have to cut like all the way down,
Oh,
open
wow.
it up, take it out. So I was probably going to be away from work for like 2 to 4 weeks. And so that's terrible. That's
Mm.
horrible, but it had not even crossed my mind that it would be anything problematic. And so that was mid January. And so I had had the biopsy, and a couple days later, I went in to see my primary care physician, who, like, I really do give her credit for saving my life, or at least extending it. And I'll get into that here in a minute. But um, I had been having heartburn, which was not new to me. I had had that before. I had had like maybe 3 to 5 pound weight loss, which I just attributed to my new exercise regimen.
Hmm.
You know, like honestly, I had been working too much. And so I kind of just figured that the heartburn was like stress related and I needed to just like, take a
Slow
little
down.
bit of time off or, maybe this was a good thing, that this was going to be happening. And for whatever reason, and again, I think universal input or whatever, she decided to run my pancreatic enzymes that day when she was doing my pre-op visit. So she ran all of this blood work and she called me the next day and I was eating lunch. I was in the middle of my clinical day. And she's like, I don't want to alarm you, but your pancreatic enzymes are off the charts, and I need you to cancel the rest of your clinical day, go straight to the ER because I think you have pancreatitis. I had no symptoms. And she said, I think that's what's going on, but I really want them to do a scan, and we can't get a scan for you unless you go to the ER and do it emergently. So I was like, well, this sucks, but I was like, well, you got to do what you got to do. So I, left work, called my husband and said, weird thing is happening when I'm going to the ER because she thinks I have pancreatitis. And probably 3 hours later, I was given a stage 4 liver cancer diagnosis. It happened so fast and yet so slow, like it was painfully slow in the ER. The ER doctor happened to be someone that I knew professionally. And so, I had worked with him. He also went to Iowa State. And like, I just remember they did an abdominal CT and he didn't tell me anything, but he's like, we need to do a chest CT. And so I knew something was up, but I didn't know exactly what was up. And then after that, he came in and he's like, Brenda, I need to show you this. And so he took me out to the nurse's station and actually showed me the CT scan. And it was just innumerable lesions on my liver, like too many to count. And and I just said, like, what are we looking at? And he's like, exactly what you think we're looking at. So I just remember like everything stops, like everything stops. And in a second, your entire life is different. Something in me died. Like I like there was such an intense feeling of grief in that moment. And I said to him, I was like, what am I supposed to tell my kids? And he said, you tell them that their mom is very, very sick, which made no sense to me at all
Yeah.
Because you
because
didn't feel sick.
Right.
I looked fine, I felt fine, but internally something was going on with me that I had not attuned to. It was horrifying to me to think that all of this could be happening and I didn't know it. So, like at that time, they guessed that it was liver cancer that had metastasized. They did not know necessarily where the primary tumor was, but I had tumors in my liver, in my lungs, in my pancreas. This up here, the little lump
Yeah.
was a tumor. I've named him Carl
Mm,
because he reminds me of the little old man from Up, lovable. And thank you, Carl. But
Yeah.
Um, and in my right adrenal gland, the majority of my tumors are on the right side of my body, which I
yeah.
find fascinating.
Hmm.
Um, and like after that, it just didn't compute. And like I literally just I put my work clothes back on And I left the ER with a consult scheduled for an oncologist, an appointment for a surgical biopsy of tumors in my liver, Ativan, and a sleeping pill.
Wow.
And that's what I left the ER with. And,
Wow.
it was in that moment that I realized that hopelessness and despair are two very, very different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've never, before or since probably, felt the doom that I
Yeah.
felt
Yeah.
in
And you
that
were by
moment.
yourself too, because
Well, my husband had come. He
he had
came to,
come, he found
so
you there. Okay.
he was with me. And I remember the first time that we were left alone, I just looked at him and I was like, I'm going to die. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to die. And I think for both of us, it was just so hard to process,
Yeah.
and so unexpected.
Did you
And
tell the
so
kids that night, or did you take some time to sit with it, or?
that was a really hard decision because we have always been very age appropriately honest with our children about things. I felt very strongly about that. This was something that I wasn't even sure that I fully understood.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think at the time, I felt like everything below the neck shut off.
Mm,
And it was just like kind of mentally trying to process everything that had happened. And in the moment, I wanted more information
of
before
course.
Right.
because I just they didn't know for sure what we were dealing with. And so I wanted to get through the biopsy, which luckily was 2 days after the ER visit. I saw the oncologist the very next day. Things happened very quickly
Mm.
for me because I think they didn't think I had time.
Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Yoga Mama, which is all the many offerings I have blending psychological science with the ancient wisdom of yoga and mindfulness. Join me for a yoga class, a meditation weekend, an online course, Wisdom Wednesday, which is the first Wednesday of every month, or maybe even an international retreat like Greece in the fall of 2025. By providing spaces and experiences for people to look inward, it is my great honor to watch people become the change they wish to see in the world.
This podcast is being sponsored by Kate Moreland Coaching. As a transformational coach and an advocate for authenticity and well-being, I work to support individuals and organizations navigating challenging times. Whether you are an individual, a leader, or an organization, your creative power lies in your authenticity. Doing the work to understand your strengths and acknowledge the patterns and rocks that are in your way is the path to well-being. Whether it's your career or your relationship with yourself or others, transformational change begins within. To learn more, reach out to me at katemorelandcoaching.com. Yeah.
Were you told at any point, like you have this amount of time left to live? Were you given a
No,
prognosis
no.
ever? No.
You
Okay.
know, I think the only time that was actually even mentioned, there was a time once because I then ended up at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, to see a specialist. There's a kind of a story that goes with that too. But the only time that any of my doctors have ever talked prognosis, there was a time that I was progressing, and my doctor said, if we don't do anything, like you'll be in trouble in like 6 to 8 weeks. So, and I think that was more of just like we need to do something harsh,
Right.
and we would really encourage you to do this harsh thing. But we understand if you like, I mean, they're again, spiritual sovereignty. They're very much like you need to
This is
make
your
the
choice.
choice to do what you want to do. But I think he was encouraging me to make this, treatment change.
So,
But yeah, it's either 0 or 100 is what I was told. It's either going to work for you or it's not. And the kind of cancer that I have is so unique that there's not a lot of between individual similarity. It's very,
What
very,
kind of cancer
Yeah,
is it?
what
It's
is it?
very rare,
it's
correct?
called neuroendocrine cancer.
Neuroendocrine.
And even with my familiarity with the medical side of things, I'd never heard of it before I was diagnosed with it. And either luckily or unluckily, I don't know, the biopsy that I had initially, your results are only as good as your sample, right?
Mhm.
So I think they just chose tumors to, there were a ton to choose from, and I think they just chose ones maybe based on size or location. I'm not exactly sure, but the results came back. This kind of cancer is almost always stage 4 by the time it's discovered. And so there's a focus on the grade of it. So it's grade 1, 2, and 3. And I was told that grade 1 is the good, grade 2 is the bad, grade 3 is the ugly. And with this biopsy, I was falling into the grade 1 category. So the local oncologist said to me, "This is great news. Like sometimes we don't even treat this kind of cancer, we just watch it, we monitor it." And at the same time, my primary care physician is saying, "Something does not feel right to me here. If this is a slow growing cancer, you know, like the oncologist said that it is, why is it everywhere?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
have
Right.
you been dealing with this for 30 years, And I mean, I had had multiple abdominal surgeries after having children. So the idea that it could have been in there and
Yeah.
no one
Nobody
saw
saw
it.
it.
Right.
Um, so something didn't sit right with her. So she referred me straight to Mayo Clinic to an internationally known specialist for this kind of cancer. And it took me a month to get in to see him, which is still pretty rapid given,
Mhm.
how healthcare tends to work. And he redid scans, and I had had significant progression
Wow.
in
Just
that
in a
month.
A
month.
month.
And he said, "There is no way that this is all just grade 1." He's like, "Those tumors might be grade 1, but you have other tumors that are grade 2 or grade 3." And come to find out, in my body, I possess tumors that are all 3 grades. So, um, yeah, it was pretty fast and furious once I got a formal diagnosis. I think it was probably a week before I got the diagnosis of neuroendocrine cancer. And so it went from like the pits of despair to, oh, maybe this is a good cancer to have if one exists,
Right.
to like, oh no, this is really, really bad, and then COVID hit.
Oh,
So,
Yeah.
I was seen at Mayo Clinic on the 28th of February of 2020, and the
wow.
world, including Mayo Clinic, shut down like around the 14th to 21st of March.
Wow.
So, luckily, when uh, when I started treatment, they put me on an oral chemotherapy that I could do here at home, so I wouldn't have to leave my house. I was basically told not to leave my house.
Yeah.
Um, and there were very, very few people that were still being seen in person at Mayo Clinic during the initial stages of COVID, and I happened to be one of them.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
when I went to Mayo, my husband and I were pretty much the only people there.
Hmm.
We were the only ones in the elevator. We were the only ones in the waiting room.
Yeah.
There was just nobody else around.
Hey, listeners. Our conversation was so rich with Brenda that Kate and I hardly noticed the time. Thus, our conversation went really long, which is why we're splitting this into 2 episodes. We also felt it was really important to give plenty of space for Brenda to tell her full story. So join us next week for the second half of this interview with Brenda as we dive into all the nitty-gritty details of what it's like to undergo over 100 treatments for cancer, Brenda's journey of despair and hope, and how she is learning to surrender into not knowing. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Come back and rewild with us again next week.